Hello everybody and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today I'm going to be teaching you 5 tips to get better at descenders. Now there's many reasons why you want to get better at descenders. It may just be because you're going to be getting more air, smoother landings, that kind of stuff. Or you're trying to grind for a Lux bike or something and you need to learn how to land and jump in the desert. But without any more talking, let's get straight into the video. Now the first tip is to learn how to wheelie. Now this isn't exactly very advanced, but if you don't already know how to wheelie, go to my channel and look at my latest video on how to wheelie. It'll teach you all the tricks on how to do it. But once you know how to wheelie, try and put yourself in some tricky situations. So for example, going around corners sharp or trying to do a backwards wheelie, which I'm going to try and do here. It is a lot easier to do this on the hardtail. There you go. A backwards wheelie requires a lot more control than a normal one, as there's a lot less room for failure. So you have to do very precise and small movements. But yeah, that's the first tip. Some maps I recommend doing this in is just a lobby and pretty much any map with flat spaces. But before trying to do too much of the stuff on this list, I would learn how to do wheelies, as it will just help you learn how to control the bike a little bit better. But on the next tip is going to be how to stick landings on jumps. Now, one of my favorite maps to learning how to do this is actually Stoker Bike Park. And how you get in here is go to ride and then go all the way down to bike parks and Stoker Bike Park up here. You've probably already been in this map as it is the most popular map in descenders. For this tip, I would recommend going on the hardtail bike. As you can see now, I have got my own custom gear on. If you want to know how to do that, go check out my most recent video. Most people will go on this line here, which has massive jumps, which is actually kind of quite a good line to do to try and land these jumps. As you can see, I didn't land the jump there. It's because I wasn't pumping. Now, if you don't know what this means, is when you go off a jump, for example here, you can see my character go up and down. That is basically just me pulling up on the right joystick, meaning that I land pretty much most things as long as I've got a decent angle. So for example, I'm not going to land this. So it's not going to save you all the time, but it is going to be a lot easier to land all those tricks. So that's the first line to practice that on. The next line is going to be this one. Now this line doesn't have as big of jumps, but it is really good for just kind of pumping in the air, trying to land as smooth as possible. For example, you don't actually need to pull up on most of these jumps. As long as you've got enough speed, you can land them most times. The only ones you really need to bunny hop on is the step ups. Most of the other ones, if you jump, you do go just a bit too far. But yeah, that's the second tip. The next tip is going to be where to jump on the actual ramps. So for example, if I jump really low here, I'm not going to go too far. And if I jump really late, I'm going to go usually quite high, but not too far. So if you pump kind of just before you think you need to pump, there's not a very easy way of explaining this. It's mainly down to experimentation. Then you go pretty much where you want to. There is better maps for this, but most of them that I found are modded maps, as they have a lot harder jumps to clear. This line doesn't really require you to actually bunny hop or jump over on these jumps, as you just go too far, as you can see there. But yeah, there's not really a specific place to practice this. You can kind of just do it anywhere that has decently good jumps. For example, in the lobby, it actually does have some really nice jumps to practice that on. But basically what you want to do is experiment with jumping at different points on the jump. So I'm not going to land most of these here. But if I jump really early, like right before the jump, I'm going extremely high and extremely far, which is what you want to do if you know it takes a lot to clear the jump. But if I pull down and then pull up right at the last second, you can see I've landed that pretty much perfectly, which is what you kind of want to be doing on these jumps. So it's really up to how big the jump actually is and how long it needs for you to clear it. I also like practicing on the hardtail for this one as well, as it's a bit more stubborn on you, basically meaning that it's harder to land jumps. You need to land it a lot more perfectly than you would for, say, on the downhill or the enduro bike. Now, while we're on the topic of bikes, the next tip is actually just to experiment with different bikes. So if I go back to the lobby here, you can see that there is 3 different bike types. So if you go into the shed and then click X, there's 3 different bike types. So there's the hardtail, the downhill bike, and the enduro bike here. Now some people might not have this, and I'm pretty sure you need to get sponsored to have these bikes. So if you don't already know how to do that, go and watch the video on my channel on how to get sponsored, and this will mean you can unlock these bikes. Now my personal favorite is the hardtail, just because it is a lot more technical and a lot harder to land on different jumps, which is really good for practicing. But most people also don't use the downhill bike here, which is actually very underrated. Although it's quite slow, it is very good for trying to do some of the more technical stuff, and you can land pretty much everything on this bike just because of the sheer amount of travel on the suspension. It basically dampens every single jump. but it is also a lot harder to clear different things. So for example, I'm not going too far on these jumps as it is a very heavy bike, which is why it's also another really good one for practicing where you jump on the actual ramps. It's also a really nice one just to do whips on as well. But yeah, the downhill bike and the hardtail are probably the two best bikes to be practicing on. And then, for example, if you're in the desert, you want to be on the best bike possible, which will be the enduro just because of its speed and the ease of landing tricks. And of course, it is a dual suspension, so you will be able to land quite harshly on most jumps. So that's the fourth tip. The fifth tip is actually using different maps. Now, if you're on PC, this is going to be a lot easier because you have this section called mods here, which basically is a lot of maps made by creators. And there is so many maps here. For example, we got the Red Bull Hardline Gap here, which is a really nice one to try and practice clearing on the hardtail. And usually most of these maps have pretty hard jumps to clear. Some of them are just for fun, for example this Max Airtime Park here, but quite a lot of them are very good for practicing different kinds of jumps on this. But some of my favorite ones are gonna have to be these skate park maps, just because there are so many different places to practice all the skills were mentioned in this video, especially doing different kind of tricks, landing jumps perfectly, and all that different kind of stuff. This one's also really good as it has a massive ramp going down here, which is useful for some of the tricks that may take longer to actually do. Obviously, I'm on the downhill bike right now, so it's probably not the best kind of bike. But especially when you have mods, you can just spend hours in these maps just trying to learn how to do all these different things. And it's just getting used to practicing in different environments and unexpected things, because when you're in the desert, it is completely randomly generated. But yeah, that's the 5 tips. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe, as it really helps out the channel. With that being said, goodbye.